I'm going to show you game 4, the final rapid play game in the final of the Magnus Carlsen Invitational tournament. Nepo in a must-win situation. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Let's hit 100k. And do consider supporting us via PayPal or patreon.com PowerPlayChess. So here we go. If you haven't seen my earlier video where Anish Giri won in game 2 of this second set, and do check that out. He won really convincingly. So after a draw in game 3, also quite exciting, this is game 4 where Nepo had to win to achieve 2-all and a tiebreak. So Giri with the white pieces, and he plays the super solid and very strong bishop b5. I've always really enjoyed playing bishop b5 against knight c6 because I feel as white that you maintain a really solid position and you get to castle very quickly, and very often you can catch your opponent out with a very quick c3 and d4. Now, very interesting choice from Nepo. Remember, he's got to win this game with black. You could say the main lines occur after g6, but those lines are very well known, easy for Giri to play. Instead, Nepo played e6, which also has a decent reputation, but the lines are less clear. You know, you can't say there's one main line here. And Giri also has had a very bad experience at playing against e6, so I think a clever move from Nepo. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes, so that damages black's structure. d3. Knight e7. Yeah, you've got to be careful with this knight. If the knight comes out to f6, then e5 is annoying, and that can be, actually, with a pawn on e5, slightly harmful for black. Can damage black's pawn structure. So knight e7, that's pretty standard in this kind of position. The knight is going to come out to g6. And here, well, I mentioned a bad experience that Giri had against Carlsen. He lost in 23 moves in 2019. And Giri had played h4 in that game, but, well, Carlsen had worked his magic and completely outfoxed Giri. Instead, knight d2, knight g6, h4 again. Giri's speciality, of course, if you can push that knight out of the way, very good. But h5 blocks the rook's pawn. Now, I suppose that in including these rook's pawn moves, white is perhaps hoping to gain this square. But I'm not sure it's that beneficial. Here Giri went for this move e5. Again, there is something quite similar to the Carlsen game, actually. There is another way of playing that, which I'll show you at the end of the game. I don't want to break the flow here. d6, and this is a very interesting move because this exchange, from a positional point of view, looks dreadful for black because now these pawns are isolated, doubled and isolated. That's not good. However, on the plus side, black gets this pawn move in. Notice he does this before taking here. These pawns clamp the center. So it's going to be very difficult for white to break out with d4. Knight c4. Bishop g4. Now you can see why, you know, I'm looking at h4 and the inclusion of h4, h5, and I'm thinking, was this really a good idea for white? Because that bishop stands so well on g4. That's a very annoying pin. Bishop g5, and the bishop comes back to d2. Well, in blocking this diagonal, it means that black can't take this pawn, basically. But f6 is a very useful move for black. It's just that, well, Giri had to do it to avoid losing the rook's pawn. And Giri brings his king to safety on the queen side. Well, that's fine. The king is looking a lot safer behind these 4 pawns with good protection from the minor pieces as well. And, you know, we can see one of the drawbacks of these doubled and isolated pawns, that this knight can sit on this square beautifully. Castles. King b1. Rook b8. Well, I think that's a bit of a feint really, because that b2 pawn is very securely protected. Very difficult for black to get an attack there. Rook g1 from Giri. It's not exactly clear what that rook is doing, it has to be said. But then again, I think it's, to my eyes, it's very difficult for white to find a coherent plan here. Now, I mean, maybe Giri was looking to play knight e3, perhaps drive the bishop out and then playing g4, but actually to realise that is really difficult. I mean, I thought that black should simply play rook e8 here, maybe queen d5 at a later point. Certainly rook e8 looks good. Nepo made such a committal decision here. He plays so quickly, and sometimes it works out very well, sometimes it doesn't look great. Knight f4. Well, that really should be exchanged off. The queen doesn't really want to go backwards. If it comes up to e4, then queen d5 could be annoying. So bishop takes, pawn takes. Now there are pros and cons to this. In some ways it clears the situation from black's viewpoint, but you know, it is annoying that this pawn has gone from e5. Then again, it's still quite difficult for white to find an active plan here, and from black's viewpoint, that e3 square has been taken from the knight. And although these bishops don't look fantastic, the bishop on c7 isn't that great. Like I said, it's actually very difficult for white to achieve anything here. So the queen comes back, and yeah, this pin is very annoying. Rook e8. And here, over the next few moves, we'll see that Giri basically vacillates. He never really hits upon a plan. Now, to my eyes, a kind of very obvious strategy here would be to exchange all the rooks. Like this. But I wonder whether Giri looked at this kind of position, excuse me, and thought this is potentially very dangerous. The king will come up to h6, the pawn comes to g5. That's a mobile pawn majority. Certainly if that pawn is exchanged, then black has a very nice overlap. But in any case, I think that's quite a difficult position for white to defend. You can see that white lacks space here. And those bishops, even that dark-squared bishop, controls some very useful squares, even though it's blocked by its own pawn. But it could come into the game later, you know, potentially attacking that pawn. So that's Giri's problem. He obviously just wasn't sure what to do when he couldn't sort of make the natural move to sort of relieve some of the pressure on his position. Exchanging doesn't really solve all his problems. So, like I said, his next few moves, he didn't really do much. I mean, these pawn moves b3 and a4 haven't got much relevance to the position. But watch what Nepo is doing. Starting with this maneuver, with this move, king f7. So here we go, king g6. What on earth is this? And then king h6. So he hits upon this idea. Could have gone that way as well, actually. But finally he gets to h6. Now, you remember that endgame I was discussing? Well, the king is already in the prime position. If pieces are exchanged, then it's ready to support that pawn push g5. So that's one thing. But the other thing is it just tucks it right out of the way. In fact, you know, it's not at all vulnerable on h6. So here we go. Giri still unsure what to do, and certainly the endgame would be really quite dubious. And another very interesting maneuver from Nepo. The queen moves from, well, this beautiful central square. But with this maneuver, the bishop takes its place and the queen comes to g6. So this puts pressure on this pawn. So it means that this rook can't come into the middle. So, you know, exchanging everything on e1 is simply impossible now. Well, rooks were exchanged, just one pair. I mean, obviously this is just not possible now because this pawn is going to be taken. So f3 blocks out this bishop, but that's not very beautiful because it leaves this square available. And after f5, f5 takes away the e4 square, but also opens up that diagonal potentially for the bishop to take the pawn. And the queen comes into g3, so Nepo very much in control here. But here, well, he was playing so quickly and he just let slip a little bit. He should play rook e6. Now there's two potential ideas. One is to switch the rook to g6, and the other is that the rook just covers d6, so then the bishop can come to d8 to attack this pawn. But Nepo played bishop d8 straight away, and that gave Giri a chance. Knight in, hitting the rook, hitting this pawn, threatening a huge check, so rook f8. And here, Giri played knight c4. In fact, if he plays queen e2, that's actually going to give him some fairly serious counterplay. But the moment passed. I mean, you know, this is really fine margins. There's no doubt that here you can see black has the initiative. Well, Giri had, yeah, just a fleeting moment where he could have perhaps got some counterplay. But now it's looking bad again. These knights can be controlled by the bishops. And this is pretty desperate. Yeah, if the knight comes back, let's say knight c4, then rook e6, followed by bishop f6. And remember, black is a pawn up. But hitting that knight is going to be absolutely disastrous. Once this bishop comes to this diagonal, maybe bishop on d4. So the game went c4. The bishop came back to g8. The knight is threatened. Knight b7, rook e6, hitting the knight. Rook h3. Well, now Nepo finished with a very nice little tactic. Rook takes knight, giving up the queen. And now there's no defense to rook e1. So even if the king moves out the way, rook e1, it's not check, but the queen has no squares. So basically in this position, Giri resigned. So brilliant performance, and that meant that the second set finished 2-2. So they went into a tiebreak. I'll show you what happened in the tiebreak in the next video. Thanks for watching. Oh, I haven't finished yet. I was going to show you what happened earlier. Sorry about that. False ending. Very good. Back in this position, I think e5 is really committal. And after this little transaction, as we saw, it was very hard for white to get counterplay. Here, in a much earlier game, Anand played knight c4. I mean, this is from 1993, prehistory. And this is black's idea, to get in this nice clamp in the centre. But the way that Vishy played it, this is really interesting. He actually achieved a very decent position after this, just really quickly. he castled queenside and managed to get it in f4. And actually white is better here. Well, there you go. That's Vichy magic for you. But that's one potential way for white to play the position. That's it. Thank you.